The obsession began with a simple flicker of realization. The world of Utaite was not merely a hobby for the 10-year-old Ao. It was a frequency she had finally learned to tune into. Every day, the pull towards that electric community grew stronger. At school, she and her friends would lose themselves in conversations about their favorite singers, weaving dreams of a future where they too might exist in that space. Her friend would frequently bring a copy of Utaite no Hon, a dreamlike magazine dedicated entirely to the world of cover singers, into the classroom, revealing a world of possibilities during the quiet moments after school. Ao would stare at the pages, vibrating with newfound inspiration, absorbing the brilliance of those who could both sing and draw. She began to immerse herself in Nico Douga and Ugomemo, stacking one moment of awe upon another until quite suddenly the atmosphere in her mind shifted. It was as if a light bulb had flickered to life, vivid and undeniable. The desire to become, a feeling she had thought discarded years ago, back when she traded her princess dresses for simple blue clothes, roared back to life. It surged through her, filling her spirit with a sudden, overwhelming purpose. Her primary goal was Ugumamo, her own digital field. Though she had once uploaded a single a cappella snippet of Senbon Sakura, it had been nothing more than a faint echo. She now felt a desperate, driving need to take a genuine step forward. As her friends' lives became increasingly crowded with club activities and cram schools, the time they spent together began to dissolve. Ao didn't try to force them to stay. Instead, she retreated into the stifling quiet isolation of her home closet. It became her sanctuary, her secret base. There she recorded her voice, timing each the simple animation she drew by hand. She moved beyond a cappella, incorporating instrumental off vocal tracks, layering her presence over the music. When the first comments arrived, it felt foreign. She had never been praised like this. She was just singing because the music made her heart beat, but the validation felt like a revelation. In that space, listening to popular singers like Rurixion, she found her home. As long as she was listening to Vocaloid, as long as she was singing, the core of her heart remained burning with life. Her likes were finally being liberated. She poured her remaining time into illustrations, filling the walls of her digital base with hand-drawn characters, Hatsune Miku, and her favorite game streamers. She began to wonder, could she be a singer who draws? Could she build her own world? These were small, quiet creations hidden away in a microscopic corner of the internet, but to her, they were treasures. Precious daily artifacts of life she was only just beginning to define. The external world, the classroom, the social hierarchy, the cruel dismissals, was a source of constant friction. But whenever the weight became too much, the world of Vocaloid offered a escape, washing away the gloom in an instant. Yet, even as her Vocaloid index climbed, she remained the same quiet girl who loves to draw within the walls of her classroom. There were fleeting joys, like becoming an illustration committee member, but reality proved to be a fragile thing. When a classmate once asked for a drawing, Ao poured her heart into it, only to be told later, "Never mind, I found someone better." Then came the trash bin incident. The drawing she had given to a boy was found crumpled in the classroom garbage, alongside the work of another girl. While the other girl wept, Demanding justice, Ao sat perfectly still. She didn't pick up her drawing. She didn't cry. Instead, her heart turned cold and crystalline. She understood the message. Your art is unwanted. You're not meant for this. She felt her spirit harden, like an armadillo retreating into its shell. By the time autumn arrived and the ginkgo leaves turned to gold, the girl who couldn't excel at sports or studies had accepted that her art was also a failure. She spent her days drifting, hidden away in her closet with her DS, until one moment changed everything. She paused her game, a voice echoing in her mind that wasn't her own. The realization had been sharp and immediate. Even though she had never been praised for her singing in school, the act of singing had become a lifeline. It was a joy to express herself, to have a world of listeners who might one day hear her voice, even if only in her imagination. She returned to Ugumemo, the digital space she had neglected while lost in her drawings. It made a silent vow. She would transform the pain of the trash bin incident into fuel. She decided she would become good enough to say, "Thanks for breaking my heart that day. It's thanks to you that I became an Utaite," directing her resolve towards the boy who had discarded her work. There was no time for hesitation. She pressed her face into the cushions in her closet and let out a fierce, whispered scream. That winter, in her 6th year of primary school, she penned a letter to Santa. When Christmas morning arrived, a magnificent, imposing box sat beneath the tree. Her parents smiled, encouraged by her excitement, believing it was just another step in her love for music. To all, it was everything. But once the initial euphoria faded, a crushing question remained. What now? She began to piece together a studio in her closet. She borrowed her father's computer, and soon her small space was crowded with equipment, headphones, an audio interface, a DIW, a condenser microphone, a stand, and a pop guard. Looking at the gear, her imagination soared. She pictured her debut, 100,000 views by the next day, the comment section buzzing with praise for a promising newcomer, and eventually, the whispers at school. Is the identity of that famous Utaite? Could it be Ao-chan? However, the dream hit a wall the moment she opened the instruction manuals. Her face went pale. The manuals were dense, filled with technical jargon that felt like a foreign language. It was a nightmare of confusing terminology. She wanted to sing, to read that word she idolized, but she couldn't even record a single note. A normal child might have asked their parents for help, but Ao refused. She had needed them to record equipment, but she would not let them help her set it up. She felt a fierce, stubborn need to carve this path alone. She wanted to reach that word by her own hand, and hers alone. She spent her days meticulously researching every unknown term. She would touch the gear, stop, panic, and then tentatively record a single phrase. To an outsider, it was a snail pace, but in her heart, she was already an apprentice Utaite. She began to set aside her DS, the device that had been an extension of her own hand. She was no longer a child just playing games. A new stage was waiting. Every hour she once spent in virtual worlds was now dedicated to hunting for Vocaloid information and wrestling with the intimidating, beautiful complexities of her starter set. To reach her goal of posting on Nico Douga, Ao began mastering the unspoken rules and etiquette of the platform. She understood that in the Vocaloid world, the original creator, also called as Honke-sama, in Japanese, was sacred. A cover was an act of secondary creation and pay absolute respect to the original work through proper credits, and adherence to the guidelines was the non-negotiable foundation of the community. Because the battle with her recording equipment took longer than expected, she turned to a stopgap, an app called Nana. It allowed her to record and upload short 90-second covers instantly. Recording and posting on Nana became her training ground. She uploaded roughly 30 tracks, mostly Vocaloid covers, and for the first time she encountered actual fans. Those comments sparked a fire in her. If she felt this much joy from the simple app, what kind of elation awaited her on her true stage, Nico Douga? She clutched those warm messages to her heart, using them as the fuel she needed to keep wrestling with the technical labyrinth of her home studio. As Ao entered middle school, the Sawaki family moved into a new apartment, an 8th floor unit near the station. More importantly, it had an elevator, and for the first time she had her own room. A corner unit with a window looking out over the glittering city lights. It was a sanctuary where she could sing whenever she wanted, free from the watchful eye of her parents. Her parents were supportive of her music, even if they didn't fully grasp the distinction between a singer and Utaite. Her mother's only request was to keep the volume in check to avoid bothering the neighbors, while her father teased that it was the result of the elite education he had provided. Yet, despite their support, Ao felt an increasing sense of isolation at home. Conversations with her parents often felt like watching the subtitles of a silent drama. She could follow the words, but the emotional meaning behind them never quite reached her. Sometimes she would collapse onto her bed, overwhelmed by the quiet, heavy atmosphere of domestic life, whispering to herself. School, however, brought a miracle. She discovered 4 classmates who loved Vocaloid just as much as she did. Together, they formed a small, secret community, trading song titles and sharing the deep, resonant joy of the music. While most of her classmates obsessed over mainstream idols, Ao found her home in the frantic, electric sound of Vocaloid rock, the mix of the raw instrumentation and the synthesized digital voice that felt like a secret language. She was proud of her niche world, but it made her a target. Skeptical boys would mock her, calling her a Vocaloid otaku, and dismissing her favorite song as quote, robotic noise. She refused to be silenced, even when they laughed or called her weird for getting passionate. She wanted to prove them wrong. The chance finally came during a school bus trip, where students were allowed to bring their own CDs to play. She clutched her bag of Utaite albums to her chest, terrified but determined. When her turn came and the music began to play, she watched the cabin cautiously. As the familiar catchy chorus featured in a popular TV commercial echoed through the bus, the atmosphere shifted. That moment, the simple validation for a classmate who had previously been a stranger, was a turning point. It was her first victory in spreading the music she loved. She realized that she didn't have to keep her passion hidden, that there was value in sharing the music that kept her burning inside. She had planted a seed, and for the first time, she felt a small, flickering sense of confidence. It took nearly 2 years, but by the time Ao was in her second year of middle school, The setup of the Utaite starter set she had received for Christmas was finally complete. Looking at the computer at the center of her desk, surrounded by the microphone and audio interface, she felt a wave of pride. It finally looked like a real studio. She spent her weekends lost in the software, layering main vocals, harmonies, and choruses over off-vocal tracks. Yet, a final hurdle remained: the mix. She couldn't afford the professional software to do it herself, and she was determined not to ask her parents for more money. After scouring the internet, she discovered the existence of mix engineers, and to her delight, some were willing to work for free. Determined to make her debut as Utaite, she chose Koagatapi's Kimi no Taion, a song she had discovered through a rhythm game, a track that had struck her like a strong wind the first time she heard it. In December of 2016, she sent a simple polite DM to a mixer she found online. The reply was brief. For 3 weeks, she waited in nervous haze. Then, on the final day of winter break, January 9th of 2017, a notification lit up her screen. When she played the track through her headphones, she was stunned. Her own voice sounded like a real cover song. She was captivated by the vibrant colors of the sound, replaying it over and over. With the help of the kind mix engineer, who even handled the encoding for her, the file was ready. She decided on her debut date, January 10th at 20 o'clock. Throughout the school day, she could barely concentrate. She told her 4 closest friends who cheered her on. Back in her room that evening, she couldn't even taste her dinner, her eyes glued to the clock. As the digital clock ticked over to 20 o'clock, she held her breath and clicked upload. She watched the screen, her heart hammering. There it was. 20 o'clock, her first post of Kimi no Taion, covered by Ado. In that moment, Ao became Ado. She had officially stepped out of her quiet, dimly lit room and leaped into the vast, dazzling world waiting beyond the screen. As the view count climbed past 10, past 20, past the number of friends she had told, she realized that strangers were listening to her voice. She had finally become someone new. For her Nico Douga account, she chose the name Ado. The inspiration came from a 6th grade Japanese class on the traditional Kyogen play Kakeyamabushi. In Kyogen, the protagonist is called Shite, while the supporting role is known as Ado. She found the 2-syllable sound sharp and clean, and it lingered in her mind. She had come to realize that she was never the main character in her classroom. She felt an affinity for the unconventional side characters in anime and manga, the ones that glimmered brightly right next to the spotlight. She wanted her singing to be a small light she could offer to others, a supporting role in their lives. With her Nico debut, she transitioned to the alphabet spelling Ado, a subtle change but a quiet declaration of her resolve as an Utaite. Her second upload, Star Night Snow, followed in the spring of 2017. She had recorded and re-recorded until she was satisfied. and even if it meant releasing a winter song just as the seasons were changing. With the third song, Strangers, released on June 2nd of 2017, she reached another turning point. Feeling hesitant to keep asking for free labor and confident in the knowledge she had scavenged from the internet, she decided to take on the mix herself. It was a reckless challenge, but she completed it. She continued her journey with a string of new releases. Each song was a lesson, a step forward in carving out the identity of Ado. Mixing was far more difficult than she had imagined, and more than once it felt as though her heart would break. Yet, by doing it herself, the process of turning raw vocals into a finished work finally connected in a single, clear line. That realization was a profound joy. Her inspiration was the Utaite Whoops Carter, known for his incredible high-range voice. One day, while frustrated with her equipment, she idly picked up an old magazine, Utaite no Home of March 2015, and read an interview where he mentioned recording inside of tone to focus. The moment she read it, she had an epiphany. She turned her closet into her own studio. It was cramped, a small space that barely allowed her to sit. But to a girl raised in closets, it was the perfect secret base. She moved in a small table and her computer, feeling finally at home in the solitude. Whenever she listened to Whoops Carter's track, she would press her hands together in gratitude in her heart. Despite the debut, Ado remained a tiny, unnoticed singer in the vastness of Nico. Then, about a year after her debut, a DM arrived from a mixing engineer 7 years her senior who had seen her work. The surprise and joy were overwhelming. She quickly realized his talent, and he became a mentor, offering advice not just on mixing but on the craft of being an Utaite. He taught her about timing, impression management, and genre selection. When she decided to re-record Kirai Kirai Diga Hidai, she chose to fundamentally rethink her style. She realized she didn't need to cling to the soft, falsetto-centered tone she had previously defined herself by. Inspired by the rock singers like Megatera Zero, she began to experiment with ganari, a raw, aggressive belting technique. The response to this new approach was immediate. The comments section buzzed, and the views climbed faster than ever. Ado began a period of intense Ganari research. She learned to balance rough, aggressive belting with moments of smooth, honey-like falsetto or sudden shattering voice cracks. As she delved deeper into every song, she felt a pendulum swinging within her heart. It wasn't just anger or shouting. It was a way to reach out and move the listener's emotions. With every melody and lyric, she discovered that the sounds she had been searching for were finally emerging naturally from her throat. In that space between the raw vocals and the finished track, Ado finally discovered the singer she was meant to be. A voice that could turn the weight of her reality into a performance that refused to be ignored. The chapter 4 of Vivarium, Ado to Watashi, is called The Birth of Ado. What I love the most about this chapter, it is exactly the resolve she had, or that first step she took to enter that world of Utaite, because having only dreams and goals is one thing, but having the courage, the resolve, and the bravery of doing that first step, which is the hardest. The first step is always the hardest, is the best part to me in this chapter. From a girl who was only chattering with her friends at school about Vocaloid to the incredible girl who gave her first step, and the patience of waiting 2 years to finally have the setup to start. Like, can you imagine the resolve she had? The amount of resolve, the dream, it must have been big enough for a child to wait 2 years to finally start her releases and uploads on Nico Douga. Children are per nature impatient, and not many would wait 2 years to finally start something. It's not even getting to the top of your dream, it's just the start of your dream. She was in the process of starting her dream. She hasn't even started yet. So waiting all of that time to finally start, it's like, can you imagine that how her resolve was? She just wanted that so much that she patiently gave little steps one at a time until she finally had her home studio, to start recording her covers. I have listened to and reacted to her first cover of Kimi no Taion. I did actually a comparison of a later re-record of of the same cover. It's really impressive that was her first cover she released on Nico Douga. It's like she was like 14 years or 13 or 14 years old at that time, and that's really impressive. It is a really impressive cover, and I loved reading the progress of her setting up the studio, from like having a club and discussing it with your friends, telling them your dream, and to finally be able to start her own channel on Nico Douga and releasing her own covers. And later to find out that instead of she going after mixers to do the job for her, they were coming to her. This is one of the first signs that she was doing a great job. While you are reading it, you can feel all of the joy she was feeling at that moment. And that's really incredible and beautiful. This was a really great video to record today. a really great chapter. I hope you enjoyed as well. If you have anything to add or comment about this chapter, please bring it here in the comment section. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time on my next video of the Miniature Garden, Ado's autobiography series. Mata ne!